Hello and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast with me, the host, Freddie Hall. Tripping over my words already because I'm that excited about today's podcast. Or is it the cold? The cold is reverberated into my bones and I'm no longer able to speak, but we'll tumble through this podcast, I'm sure. Adam joins me once again, back with Johnny Bisbee from Off Grid NFL, fantastic website for all your NFL articles. And there's been some brilliant ones recently. And when I was thinking about today's show, literally Off Grid popped up with the article that we're going to talk about because the Lions, the Detroit Lions, you've got to be hearing the roar from Detroit, from Ford Field, because the Lions are on a big winning streak at the minute. Another fantastic win against the Minnesota Vikings, a divisional rival. I can't remember the score off the top of my head now, but it took 34-23, going to 6-7 on the season. Second place behind the Vikings in that division with the lowly Chicago Bears and Adams Green Bay Packers slimly behind there. The Lions are vying for a playoff spot. They're in the hunt. They were the talk of the offseason because of Hard Knocks. They were featured on that. Dan Campbell was so amazing on it. We wanted to run through a wall for him, Johnny, when he was on there. The guy's such a hype artist. Are you hearing the Lions roar, Johnny? Are they going to be roaring all the way?
Dan Campbell, yeah, he is someone I'd run through a wall for. I think from just some of the plays from this weekend were very, very ballsy, as Penei Sewell said after his catch late in the second half to seal the game, but also the punt as well in the first half when it was 4th and 8, the fake punt. Many coaches around the league would have not have the kahunas to giving that a try. So, he's someone who, for the last couple of years, with his antics in the dressing rooms, has been a real sort of hype man for his players. There's been question marks sometimes over his coaching sort of ability, but it's clear that the players are just playing out of the skin for him. Jared Goff been fantastic, like I said. It wasn't even his greatest game against the Vikings, but he's really stood out, as someone who can lead this franchise forward. He's not necessarily going to be the bridge quarterback that everyone thought he was going to be after the Stafford trade. It's great to see. I think, who would have called it back in October when they'd won just one game? They were still playing remarkably on offense, scoring, putting up great numbers, but on defense they were, coming up quite short. But yeah, this is a really young, energetic team with a coach who, just brings out the best of his players. So they're a very, very exciting team to watch, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. Go on this sort of hopefully a nice playoff run, because they're definitely some team that I'm certainly rooting for because of the way they're playing.
Can I just quickly say, just quickly, as the older person on this podcast, I'm too old to run through walls for anybody. I'm sorry, we've got to stop this. It's madness. I'm done. I can't run through a wall.
You've clearly not had Dan Campbell over for dinner any time.
No, I haven't. That's very true.
Get him in.
I think we can talk in detail about some of the players and some of the plays for the Lions in a moment, but I would like to stick on Dan Campbell, Adam, because obviously Detroit Lions being a divisional rival, and yourself, when you look at the coaches that are in the NFC North, I mean, there was obviously, we got to peek behind the curtain with Hard Knocks in the offseason with Dan Campbell, and some see it as unconventional, and there's a lot of coaches that have tried this way, have been very player empowerment, very sort of loud, brash. But do you think it works for certain teams? It doesn't work for certain teams because, when you look at the Green Bay Packers this year, a divisional rival, would you be looking at someone like Dan Campbell thinking like, God, I wish I had that sort of coach in my team?
No, not really. No, he isn't really I get it. I get why people like him. I get the enthusiasm and how it breeds enthusiasm within the squad and stuff like that. I completely understand all of that. It's not my kind of guy, just not what I'm into at all. But yeah, I completely understand why people like that. I wouldn't personally want him coaching my team because I think that can get you so far, but I think there is a limit to what that can get you. And at the end of the day, you need that guy who has the knowledge and has the ability to get you over the line. You look at some of the coaches that have won the Super Bowl in the last few years. I don't see many of them being loud, brash kind of, enthusiasm sort of people who manage to really get them going. It tends to be more, a lot of the whole sort of Shanahan McVay tree in the last few years. You've got your Belichick, who I know Belichick likes to scream and shout a bit, but it's not Dan Campbell. So I think there is a limit to what that can get you. Having said all that, because you are starting from such a low position that the Lions were over the last few years, it's a positive, and the fans should take that as a positive, and that they are doing really well and embrace what's going on, because I think he might just fit them. Like he might just be the perfect fit for that specific franchise that will get them and keep them going. And I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs or not this year, but they have the potential if they keep on going and keep winning games. The one thing I would say, something that we have been saying in the betting shows all for the last few weeks, most of the year, they're a completely different beast at home. Completely different beast at home. When they're away, Jared Goff struggles a lot more, and that's a real issue that they're going to have, because even if they make it in the playoffs, they're not winning the division. So the Vikings will win that division. So they won't get it. They'll end up being a wild card if they were. So they're going to be away straight away, and everything's going to be away. It's going to be really tough for them in order to be able to do that. And so I think it is really hard for them to do anything major. But as we said at the beginning of the season, they are one of the exciting teams that we hoped this would happen with, and it seems to be happening now. And so hopefully they'll keep going, and they will sort of, I think they'll just miss out, but it's a great building step for them for next year.
I think you're right in terms of, for this franchise, it does work from Detroit. Cold city in the north there in the winter, a tough city, a city of industry at one point that has now all shriveled up with like a lot of industrial cities have done. Same things happened in the UK with places like Sheffield and Liverpool and stuff like that, where it's harsh, it's brash, it's out there, it's very much in its own universe, sort of thing. And there's one thing they love in Michigan, and that's their college football and the Detroit Lions. And I think you're right in that terms of the franchise suiting a coach. This is a perfect fit. New England, Boston, home of such great universities, eclectic, intellectual. That's Bill Belichick. Rams, Sean McVay, good-looking dude, younger, suave, exactly like LA. Very young, very suave and hip and everything like that. And it does really suit the guy to be in Detroit. Let's move on to some of the players, because we've spoken about this a lot of times, Johnny, in terms of serviceable quarterbacks. The serviceable quarterbacks can take you so far. And no one has really ever believed in Jared Goff in Detroit Lions. Everyone's just thought, well, Goff's there for the placeholder. The Lions will lose a load of games with him. They'll get the number one pick. They'll draft the next guy. Last year they had the second pick. They take Aiden Hutchinson. There was no quarterback on the radar at that point, but they thought was the needle mover. Unlike this draft that is coming up, actually, where there's quarterbacks in there that could be a massive needle mover. But Jared Goff was, I thought, it might be not his best game statistical-wise. He threw for 330 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, he threw 4 touchdowns against Seattle with 378 yards, did get an interception there. That has been his best game of the year. But back-to-back games with 300-plus yards, over 2 touchdowns. And he's really looking like he's getting this offense going. Do you think that's a bit of Goff, the offensive coordinator, the players they've got there as well, which we will also talk about? How impressed have you been with Goff in Detroit this year?
Yeah, hugely. I think, like you said, no one's ever really given him a chance. I think he's never, gone on to be the that unified number one overall pick quarterback who's going to lead a team to multiple Super Bowls. But it's worth, remembering that he took the Rams to the Super Bowl. He was a relatively, probably a top 15 quarterback at best. While at the Rams, he never shone. He was never the face of the Rams, obviously, with their sort of defensive players taking that sort of. So I think, and I don't think he's that in Detroit either. But I think this season, he's really sort of shown that he is a a bona fide starting NFL quarterback rather than being someone who is just going to fall off once the Lions draft, whether that be this year or the next year, their quarterback going forward. So I've been very impressed with him, but like Adam said, he is a different beast. And the Lions in general a different beast away from home. I think that's we've mentioned about the grit of Detroit and how much they are loved and the atmosphere in Ford Field. I think that definitely does have something to play with it, particularly for such a young team. But yeah, I've been very impressed with Jared Goff. I think he is the ideal quarterback for this team at this current moment. A young sort of building block team with someone who's got that experience of leading team deep in the playoffs, can share different offensive a different sort of offensive mind, and yeah, I think he will certainly be the starting quarterback next year. I'm unconvinced whether the Lions they will potentially have a top 5 draft pick in 2023, but I'm still unsure whether they feel that they need to draft a quarterback next year. Perhaps wait another year and see how everything pans out. But yeah, certainly they're in a brilliant place with Goff to push on, draft more young, energetic players. We've seen Jameson Williams obviously on his debut only had 1 reception, but it was such a deep throw. They're working in his just such a challenge. I'm really, really looking forward to him getting more of the ball going into next year. And the defensive players, obviously Aiden Hutchinson, who's been a real revelation. Obviously coming in, there was so much hype around him, but he's been very solid in his opening year. And yeah, I think the building blocks are definitely there for Detroit. And I'm hoping that Goff can really sort of push on with this team and cement himself as the quarterback going forward.
I suppose that's building on that, Adam, to also the other players that are on this team and how impressed you have been with them, because eyebrows were raised when they traded away TJ Hawkinson, being one of their sort of star-ish players, I suppose. Never really warranted the first round pick that he got in the end, I suppose. But players like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was just built and looks so good as a wide receiver. I think I'd put him in the top 10 spot as a wide receiver at the minute. I think he's been phenomenal. You got players like DeAndre Swift, who has been in and out of the team this year because of injury. He's finding a little bit of form now. Jamal Williams, who I believe is he still the leading rushing touchdown leader. That doesn't sound quite right. And I mean, obviously a player that you knew pretty well at Green Bay, and their offensive line, Penei Sewell, has been fantastic this year. I mean, they've had a good offensive line for a while. And as well on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, I was always a massive champion of Amani Oruwariye, but he's really not been that much this year. But Jeff Okudah has stepped up a bit this year. I thought the signing of Deshaun Elliott, the safety from the Ravens, was really good. He's looked impressive. Aiden Hutchinson, obviously, of course. What do you make to and like Johnny said as well? I know it's only his first game, but Jameson Williams. It looks like a bright spark as well. We finally got to see him after his horrible injury from the end of his Alabama career, getting in and drafted. And how impressed are you with how they've done so far, and also the fact that they're all so young as well?
Yeah, I think the one thing that you can give credit to Dan Campbell for is that he's built a team well, in respect of that he's, I mean, given the type of guy he is, this isn't really a shocker, to be honest. But he's kind of gone very much, I'm going to have a good D-line and a good O-line, and then we're going to put good young pieces around that. And I think you've seen the reason Goff's done well is because the O-line has been very good and has managed to keep him up for as long as they have done. So that's why. Also, it helps with the run game. I mean, as you said, Jamal Williams has been amazing this year. I think, most Green Bay fans loved him, or would have loved to have kept him. Unfortunately, it was just the contract that was the reason why he ended up going. But yeah, he's a great running back. He just happens to have been given the opportunity with a great O-line in front of him, and that's the reason why he's done as well as he has. Like most of the guys in the NFL, they get the opportunity, then they'll probably do pretty well with it. So that's why Williams has been good. But yeah, I mean, St. Brown, we saw him last year at the back end of last year in his rookie year, how well he did. And, you know, he's really kicked on. Jameson Williams looks like a great player. I mean, we obviously don't know a lot about him if you've just seen the NFL, but I know like Andrew was really hot on him at, you know, Alabama wide receiver, about how good he was in college, and you know he's hit the ground running already. So I think it's been really good. They've drafted well. You know, they've brought in players like Aiden Hutchinson. It's you know, the guy, again, it's the right guy for the right team at the right time kind of thing. It's like they could have gone a different way, but they went for Aiden Hutchinson, and they felt that he was the best one, and I think they were quite surprised that the Jags didn't go for him in the draft, but he fell to them, and they were like, happy days, we'll have him because he's our guy in our our town. So yeah, I think they've built well. They've done everything right, in fairness to them. You know, that's the one thing I would say. They've done everything right. They've drafted well. They've brought in a good solid O-line, good solid D-line, and they're starting to see the rewards for it now. I just think that it's probably going to be a bit too little too late for this season, but that doesn't mean, you know, there's a reason they gave him a 7-year deal or a 6-year deal that Dan Campbell got. That's the whole point of this. It's like, it's not a 1-year thing. So I think it's just a matter of time for them. And unfortunately, I think we'll be struggling against them for the next few years, to be honest.
And in terms of Adam, what do they need to do in these last 4 games? They've got the Jets, they've got the Panthers, they've got the Bears and the Packers. They are at home, if I'm reading that the right way round, because I always get confused about which way round they all are. They are at home 3 times. 3 times, yeah, they're at home. I think the rest of the season.
I think it's the other way around.
Is it the other way around? They're away 3 times, and they're at home to they're at home to the Bears. But they're away at Jets, away at Panthers, away at Packers. With the strength of the NFC East as well, all 4 of them teams really competing for that wild card spot. Obviously, the top team, the Eagles, already qualifying, will probably be the number 1 seed. The Vikings probably winning the division as well. I mean, it could slip away, but I really doubt it. What have the Lions got to do now in these last 4 games?
I mean, really, they've just got to carry on doing what they're doing. Is what they've got to do. But it's going to be very, very difficult. I mean, you're going up against an incredibly good Jets defense, which is going to be tough to beat away from home. I think that's a real issue for them. You're going to be up against a Packers team that is going to be out of the playoffs, and you know, are not going to want to just give it away to them. So that's going to be a tough one. Bears at home, I think they've probably got a good shout at winning because they're at home. Like I say, they're a completely different team at home. And then who was the other one they've got away?
The Panthers.
Panthers away. Well, you saw this week with the Panthers. It's like, you know, they're a team that just turned up this week and managed to get a win. So I don't think any of it's going to be easy. I think that they're going to have to try and carry on replicating what they're doing at the moment because that's what is working for them. But I just don't think they're quite there.
Moving on from the Lions, news came through. Well, I've not actually watched the highlights yet nor seen it, but a non-contact injury from Kyler Murray. There was suspicion that he's tore his ACL last night, and the MRI has confirmed this today. His season is over. That's according to Ian Rappaport. And Jeff Desai and Tess confirmed that Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray did in fact suffer a season-ending torn ACL on the 3rd play of Monday night game via the Patriots, which very much upset my my partner in fantasy football. She benched Trevor Lawrence and started Kyler Murray. So 36 points on her bench sitting there and -2 or whatever it was. A non-contact injury. So I think there's some things that have come out saying like, well, he doesn't study well. This hasn't got anything to do with it, Johnny, has it? I mean, they did lose to the Patriots in the end, 27-13, 4-9 on the season. I presume Colt McCoy came in, who did pretty all right with the Cardinals when he has come in beforehand. How big a blow is this for the Cardinals, and how big is it for Kyler Murray moving forward, someone who relies on his feet a lot?
Yeah, it's just the worst ending to an awful season for Murray and for the Cardinals. Thoughts with thoughts with him. You know, it must be absolutely awful to experience an injury like an ACL, which can have such long-term effects, and particularly for a quarterback who, you know, is so good and so mobile with his feet. This could have implications for next season, which is just the worst news that Cardinals fans want to hear. 4-9. It's been a dreadful season for the Cardinals. You know, there's all the rumours around the coaching staff with Cliff Kingsbury, looking very unlikely that he's going to be there next season. And obviously Colt McCoy's proven himself as a more than capable replacement. I'd argue that he's probably the best backup quarterback in the league. But, you know, you want your star to be playing week in, week out and really pushing on a franchise who, you know, last year was so good. Was it last year they started 7-0? And it's just been, you know, the last 12 months, a lot of things off the field, particularly with Murray and Kingsbury have really, altered and obviously DeAndre Hopkins as well, him not being available for the whole season. You want your best players playing out there. For the Cardinals, it's they just want the season to end now, get to the draft, get to the off season where they can really sort of change the culture, because I feel there's just a little bit of negativity around the Cardinals at the moment. But for New England, it keeps their playoff hopes alive. It's going to be interesting to see how they get on in the AFC East for the rest of the season.
Obviously, we wish Kyler all the best and hope that he does come back better and hope his rehab goes all right. It is such an unfortunate injury, and we never want to see injuries to any players. There was a little bit of an eyebrow raised there, Adam, when you said about Cliff Kingsbury, when Johnny said about Cliff Kingsbury potentially being on the hot seat and going. Do you have a counter argument here?
No, I completely agree. He should be going, but he's on a six-year deal, isn't he? I mean, that's they only. This is the thing. It was there was a stat I saw. It's a couple of weeks ago now, but it's obviously a bit worse. But they'd only won like 5 out of their last 17 games, and they gave Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim new deals in the middle of that. I mean, that's something's not quite right there, and that's not just Kyler Murray. That's something going on in the front office as well. It's just not working for whatever reason. Yeah, I think he probably should be going. It's not working clearly, and it hasn't worked. I know they went 7-0, but they fell apart in this. Like Johnny said, in this season, losing Hopkins at the beginning is a massive problem for them. But they still had players. You had Hollywood Brown there for
Hollywood Brown was on IR for a fair while.
Yeah, but when Hopkins was out, he was around, and I don't know. You just kind of feel like, okay, maybe not everything has fallen their way, but at the same time, for what team has it fallen their way? It just kind of feels a bit like there's issues there that are worse than what I think a lot of people are saying, and they kind of went all in a little bit by bringing in players like Watt, didn't they, and Hopkins and Brown, and you feel like they've done it and they've spent the money and they've gone for it, and they're currently 4-9, and apart from the Bears who are 3-10, it's like they're either level or worse than everyone else in the NFC. So it's just not happened for whatever reason. I think Cliff Kingsbury should be going, but I mean, you're just giving the guy a 6-year deal. So,
well, interesting enough, when you say about paying people and big deals, that was Kyler as well. Do you think there's a little bit of buyer's remorse there? Because as much as this injury is clearly a freak injury, there is now injury history with Kyler, and if it wasn't for his whole game revolving around his mobility, it might be a different conversation. But do you think there is a little bit of buyer's remorse?
Possibly. I don't know.
And also to add to it, when you look at players like Lamar Jackson, who haven't signed that contract yet and are very similar style players, what do you think their minds are about that?
I think when it comes to the Cardinals, I think they would continue to say he was the right guy to draft at the time, and that he's a good enough quarterback that we believe in him, and so therefore we have to pay him, kind of thing. It's one of them things where it's almost like clearly the talent is there. There clearly is some talent there. I mean, I'm not particularly keen, I must admit, but there is some talent there, and you feel like because of that, they've kind of got themselves in a situation where you sort of have to go in with him, because if you don't, then what are you doing? You're kind of like you're admitting that it's all gone wrong. It was a waste of time. And you're going back to the start again, and it kind of feels a bit like that's not the way forward. When you're, what was the point of drafting the guy in the first place if as soon as he reaches a point of paying him, you run away from him? So I think that's a little bit difficult to go against that, but. Yeah, I mean, I think players like Lamar Jackson, it's just a different way, isn't it? What Lamar Jackson's doing, he's just he's backing himself. That's the way forward, and maybe in a way teams will be more encouraged to go down that route. But the problem with that is if you don't sign him up, there is a chance that Lamar Jackson could just walk eventually if you don't do that. So, you could be because you'd probably franchise tag them if they didn't agree a deal. So you're probably looking at 6 years down the line, something like that. And then he walks. So you just have Jackson for 6 years and he goes. I mean, that's the alternative to not signing. So it's a difficult one. I get why they've done it, but I don't think it's necessarily going to work out very well, just purely because I don't think he's quite as good as what everyone seems to think he is.
And similarly, Johnny, I mean, moving on to a little bit with Lamar, he looks at players like him who are waiting for that contract, backing themselves, see a freak injury like this, play a similar way. Already has had niggles this year. Ravens could be in with a sniff of the playoffs, I admit, but I don't think they are personally. Do you expect to see him again this year? Because there's players like that will tend to be the ones that will be like, well, I've got to think about myself here. A guy who plays very similar to me, just a couple of miles away, is more than a couple of miles away. A large amount away from Baltimore is Arizona, but he's been signed. He got his money, and he's had a freak injury. I play a similar way. If I get a freak injury, I ain't going to get my money. What do you think goes through that players with in that situation?
Yeah, I think it's precisely that. I think at the end of the day, this is a business for players. This is their livelihoods. For someone like Lamar Jackson, who could get a blank check from there will be teams out there who will be saying, look, we want you to, we'll give you whatever you want for you to sign for you, that sort of thing. And if an injury in the next few weeks. When's he out till? Is out till is it week 17? Or touch and go. It's for his livelihood. It makes sense for him to be like, no, I'm going to sit out. That sort of thing. We've seen it from players over the years. It's not going to be a shock. It's a really difficult one because from like an outside sort of point of view, looking down on the players, we take that obviously very negatively. We don't want to see players being greedy, but at the end of the day, if someone like Lamar Jackson feels he's risking his future in the league by going back out on the field, then so be it. But it's an interesting topic because I can see both sides of the argument, and from a player's point of view, which is ultimately the most important, protecting themselves and protecting their future interests is of absolute paramount importance, which potentially we could see.
We have to move on to a topic which I don't really want to talk about because I know what's going to happen. So we've had the first team this year that is officially in the playoffs, the Philadelphia Eagles. And one of our co-hosts, one of our contributors, one part of the team, Gareth, lovely guy, just loads of stuff for the pod. I mean, he backs himself with the Eagles. Let's put it that way. He's very confident, as a lot of people are about the Eagles these days. But I think we, as the first team that have got into the playoffs now, Adam, I think it's got to be a bit of congratulations in order for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, they've been great. There was I brought this up before. I believe there was a conversation in the preseason that me and you and Andrew had when we were out having dinner one night and laughed at. Laughed at. They just mocked me completely when I came out and said that I think the Philadelphia Eagles could make not only the playoffs, but potentially the Super Bowl. I was mocked. And now look at it. You see, you just didn't trust me, did you? What can I say?
You were known for being an Eagles hater for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I feel people don't understand is that it wasn't that I was an Eagles hater, it is that I hated all the moves that the Eagles were doing. Now I understand what the Eagles are doing and what they're trying to do. It makes sense. So it's all right.
I mean, Johnny, they're 12-1. They've been really remarkable to watch on both sides of the ball. Really, really impressive. We've talked about them a lot in this podcast because you have to talk about, the teams that are doing well. You got to talk about them. And the Eagles have been consistently doing well all year. They've got over that hump of like what we said before, the Cardinals and the Steelers in past years where they've won a lot of games and then sort of fell off the needle. Well, 4 games left. The way they played the weekend, beating the Giants, who are not a bad defense at all, so convincingly. They were so powerhouse. The way Jalen Hurts is progressing, the way the defense looks and how hard hitting it is. I mean, how impressed have you been with the Eagles this year?
Yeah, exactly the same. They've been by far the best. They've stood atop the NFC this year, and I think they're them and the Bills probably the most feared teams. Have the 49ers in there maybe, and the Chiefs. But yeah, certainly in the NFC, they are, they've stood far beyond any other competition we've seen so far. Like you said, the hump that they had a few weeks ago, where there was issues. I think of the ground game, they've had injuries, but now that they are a juggernaut of players in that side. What predictions? I'm still not sure about it. I think if they came up against the 49ers, they're the only ones I think that could stop in.
Even with Big Brock Purdy, even with Brock at Mr.
Well, before Garoppolo's injury, I was convinced that the Super Bowls were the 49ers were the team to watch to get to the Super Bowl. I think we might have to watch another game of Brock. I think, as good as it was at the weekend, he's just got a very Mike White feel for me. A couple of games down the line, it might be a completely different story. But yeah, great to see from him against the Bucs this weekend. But yeah, back to the Eagles. I've been so impressed with Jalen Hurts, not just for my fantasy football team, him standing up among the rest once again. He's come on leaps and bounds, and I don't think there can be a question about the Eagles tying him down with his own contract extension perhaps this year, but there rumors have been being very unsure still. Seems quite unusual for me, but yeah, I think he's come on leaps and bounds, and he's probably the MVP for me, ahead of Mahomes. I think he's just stood out from the rest. Certainly, consistently been great with his feet, and he's progressed so much as a passer, I think. So yeah, been a joy to watch this year.
That was going to be my next question to you, Adam. Is he the MVP of this year, Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think he is, personally. I think he's there was a lot of a debate about whether or not he would be able to lead a team, whether his passing ability was going to be enough. I think he's very much put that to bed this year. Every sort of criticism that you had of him, I think, has now gone. It's like he he can still rush, and he's very good in that way, but he's more than capable of, when he's playing up against a team who are good against the run, to beat him over the top. You know, he can do that. Yes, it helps that AJ Brown came in, of course it does, but then, you know, what quarterback that has a season like this doesn't have some form of top quality wide receiving core there? So I think that was why you can say that he's definitely worth a shout for it, and he's now favourite for it as well. You look past that, I don't really know what else he needs to do. I mean, I think, I know this isn't for MVP. I think people will still criticise him until he starts winning playoff games. That's another one. But that's it. I mean, if he wins the first playoff game, he's in the championship game. I don't see what people can really throw at him, to be honest. I just think he's now become not only a very good rushing quarterback, but also a very good passing quarterback, and also is a very strong leader in that dressing room, and they really rally around him. And yeah, I think, you know, even when you have certain star players out, I mean, AJ Brown missed a couple of games. You've had Dallas Goedert out, which is essentially his safety net for the last 4 games. It hasn't mattered. I mean, they had that bit of a dip, but they look pretty good, and they don't look like they're stopping anytime soon. So yeah, I think I would be surprised if he didn't win it now. I think it would probably take an absolute catastrophe for the Eagles, or like an injury, and Mahomes just does really, really well for it to be any different. So yeah, I would have him as MVP.
And do you think something's good, because Hurts, did he get dropped for Minshew at one point in last year? Or was he injured? I can't remember now.
I'm not too sure whether there was a time, wasn't there, when Minshew came in?
I think he might have been injured, but I mean, this is obviously, it's a bit unfair, the comparison here. But do you think there is something to be said for franchises that are just a bit patient with their quarterbacks? Because when you look at quarterbacks around the league this year, Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields being a very, I mean, Jalen Hurts did not have the hype that Fields and Lawrence had coming into the draft. I will admit that. But equally, they're quarterbacks that get drafted that weren't exactly working straight away. Hurts didn't exactly look like he was great straight away. He was very much a runner, couldn't really throw, it felt like. Lawrence struggled at start with Jags, seems to be getting better, had a whirlwind of a game the weekend just gone. Fields struggled all of last year, a little bit at the start of this year, and has just become electric in the last few weeks. Is there something to be said where it can just click for the quarterback, or also the franchises do need to be a bit patient? Because in a league which is essentially about winning, we are very quick to move on from the key piece of an offense very quickly. Do you think it helps franchises when they do have that patient quality?
Yeah, I think you have to, don't you? I mean, realistically, you have to be a bit patient with these guys. I mean, you can't just expect, you know, college football is not the same as the NFL. It just isn't. It's like the guys that you're up against are different. So it's not something that you can just expect them to be amazing at from day one. So I think you have to hang around and give them a few years. That's the reason they're on a rookie contract. So I think you have to do that, because otherwise you're just, I mean, what are you doing, sort of thing? What's the point of taking them if you're just going to throw them away in like a couple of years? Don't get me wrong, if it really doesn't work and you can see that there are signs that it's not working, and you know, we happen to have someone here who has a quarterback.
I was about to say, this feels like a delicious segue into the same topic, but going to Johnny, I suppose, with Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
I'll let you finish Adam first.
No, I think I think you have to, unless it's really not working very well.
Yeah. Well, so similar questions, I was saying, Johnny, to yourself, I suppose, about Zach Wilson being in that sphere of quarterbacks that have been drafted recently, not formed well. Do they need to be given time? Has been dropped, essentially, I suppose, and then brought back in and dropped again, it feels like. What's these comparison of these quarterbacks to Zach Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, I want to agree with Adam, and I think, you know, generally I do. I think, you know, unfortunately, coming from the franchise which historically has been the most impatient of teams, and well, obviously seeing Zach Wilson and his lack of progress, and the losing the sort of dressing room feel about him, really isn't great as a fan. And seeing obviously Jets Twitter as the juggernaut it is, just jumping on the bandwagon to berate Wilson and call for the end of his career in New York. It's obviously very sad to see. When we'd seen him in college, he was a really exciting young prospect, brilliant with his feet, and had a ginormous arm. We've only seen that on a few occasions so far in New York, but I do want to be patient. I do want to see him come in this weekend and give a brilliant performance against a team like the Lions, who I think this offense should be licking their lips almost at the opportunities they hopefully will get on Sunday. But also, it's one of the. I was very in the Sam Darnold camp when we let him go, and to see him have another smoothish game for the Panthers, and obviously see the state that the Jets quarterback room is in. It's a very sort of strange one for me because I really want to give Zach Wilson time. But seeing the team as it is, the defense as strong as it is, and now these offensive weapons, Garrett Wilson having such a standout season in his rookie year, we need to get the quarterback position right. If it's not this offseason, then it's the next, because we can't waste this opportunity. We should be, obviously the AFC East, the competition has grown ginormously in the last year or two, and we can't get left behind. So I'm very, maybe ask me next week after he comes back and has 500 yards and three passing touchdowns. But I think for New York anyway, they have to get the team, the quality that they have, they need to get that right very quickly and can't really be patient at this stage.
About Joe Flacco, never thought I'd say that. He was so good at the start there. He was so good. Johnny, Adam, thank you for joining me tonight. Make sure if you want to read any NFL articles, you check out Off Grid NFL, ran by Johnny here, for all the fantastic guys are over there with a massive range of articles that are just brilliant. So make sure you check that out. A little bit of a different scheduling week this week for us. We've got the fantasy show. Obviously, congratulations if you made it to the playoffs. I did. However, I'm coming up against our league winner, I suppose. Only lost one game, and that was to Adam, who gets predicted 140 points before the week even starts. So I've probably got no chance in hell against him. Crashing out the quarterfinals, maybe. But the fantasy show will be back for all your quarterfinal needs, or even semi-final needs, or even broader than that, I suppose, within fantasy football. We will be doing the Sunday preview betting show earlier, because this week we do have games on Saturday. I've got 3 games coming this Saturday, which should be a lot of fun. I'm actually meeting Andrew in London, hopefully going to watch the games together, so that should be good fun. Hopefully post some stuff on social media as well. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week. I know it won't be England in the World Cup final, but we can still be happy in the fact that the NFL is ploughing right on towards the Super Bowl, and what a wonderful time it is as well. Until then, have a good rest of your week. We'll see you all very soon.